Very unusual for us at Central Synagogue. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for braving rain and the elements. It's quite a day, and we appreciate seeing so many of you here. And we know that there's others who are going to be taking this in virtually and digitally, and so hello to all of you. Tonight's program is another in an ongoing series we've been having that was developed in the wake of October 7th by the Adult Engagement Department. I want to thank them and their whole team for putting together this series. This is the fourth part in our series of Israelis and Palestinians pursuing peace, and hearing from different organizations and leaders in that space who have been talking about both what they do and what they have done, but also what's changed and how they're continuing to pursue that work in light of Israel that has changed and a region that has changed. So we have with us representatives from the Reassessing Center, and we're delighted that this is a welcome back, not just a hello, but a hello again. You were with us as we marked Israel at 75, and it's really wonderful to get to hear people with whom we start to build a relationship and get to know a little bit better. I have an opportunity to introduce you both, if that's okay. I know you were saying we're sort of informal coming from the part of the world where we come from, but we'll do the formality for us Yakis. Keep it short? Oh, boy. Well, we have with us, I want to say, John Munayer, who's the Director of International Engagement, and also Dr. Sarah Bernstein, the Executive Director of the Reassessing Center. John was born and raised in Jerusalem, involved in peacebuilding and dialogue initiatives from a very young age, and continued to pursue relevant subjects in university, completing his MSc in International Relations of the Middle East at the University of Edinburgh, an MA in Theology and Religious Studies, building interreligious relations from a university in Amsterdam, who I have researched trying to be able to pronounce, and it failed miserably.
Just VU Amsterdam is fine.
There you go. And a BA in Religion and Politics and Society from King's College London. And John also researches, writes, and lectures on Palestinian Christian identity, Palestinian theology, and interreligious dialogue. Sarah was born in the UK with a background in law and mediation, and has worked in the field of peacebuilding and coexistence since 2000, specializing in interreligious dialogue. And she was awarded her PhD in Peace and Reconciliation Studies by Coventry University in England for her thesis on the theme of narratives of belonging, life stories of Jewish Israeli women in Jerusalem. And she's also the Israeli editor of the book Women of the Book, a Jerusalem Collage. And has published many other works in various, this is my attempt to keep it short, various publications, and I'll end it there, as she also lives in Jerusalem. And we want to thank, again, you both for being with us and taking the time to be with us. Why don't we, if we can, hear a little bit about the Reassessing Center, its work. Before we go into that, and it's clear from your bios, this is work that you've both been passionate about and committed to since before coming to the Reassessing Center. So before talking about the Reassessing Center, maybe just share with us your story of how you came to this work. Was there a moment or an inspiration that kind of made you say, this is going to be life's work?
Hi, everybody. Okay, so I actually came into this field completely by accident. I was a lawyer, I was a mediator. I'm actually married to a Reform rabbi, and he was offered a position at HUC in Jerusalem, and we moved back from Haifa to Jerusalem, and I was therefore needed to restart my, I closed up my law practice in Haifa, and we moved to Jerusalem, and I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do next, and I was offered a job as the program director for an interreligious organization, and I thought, all right, I'll move a little further along the scale of being a lawyer, being a mediator. I'll move into dialogue. So it was really pretty much an accident, a coincidence, and then having started, I felt like I had found my life's work, and then went on to do further studies in the field, and I've been working in the field for over 24 years.
My story is a bit different. I belong to the Christian community in the land, so we're around 180,000 people. So interreligious dialogue is sort of a necessity. with both the Jewish and Muslim communities. So I studied a master's degree in theology, but it was a focus on interreligious relations. And as part of my degree, I had to do an internship. So I was looking online, even though I studied in the Netherlands, I was looking at different internship programs in Israel and came across the Rossing Center, and I emailed the info email, and Sarah replied pretty quickly, and that's how my story started at the Rossing Center.
Thank you. So why don't you, I know you have a presentation, why don't you tell us a little bit more about the work and some of the other aspects of the Rossing Center itself.
Sure, so we'll just talk for maybe 15, 20 minutes, and then we'll be more of a conversation. And thank you so much for sacrificing your dry feet and socks and coming here today. I am a Palestinian Christian, citizen of the State of Israel, and I grew up in an Israeli Jewish school. I'll say that again. Palestinian Christian, citizen of the State of Israel, and I grew up in an Israeli Jewish school. And I remember going into my first day of school. I was extremely nervous, as any kid would be. But I was also nervous because my Hebrew wasn't that great. I didn't know anyone at school. And off I went for the first day. And I remember this kid who was probably twice my size. I was a very small kid, who approached me. And he just asked, "Do you want to play together?" And I said, yes. And that's how I started my friendship with Amitai. And me and Amitai were best friends at school. I invited him over for Christmas, for the different family events that we had back home, and he would invite me to Shabbat dinners and other occasions. We really developed a close relationship. But as we grew up, and we were more aware of our identities, our narratives, our differences, our relationship was harder to sustain. When I tried to bring up certain issues relating to the conflict or other issues within the State of Israel, Amitai didn't really want to discuss this, right? He didn't believe in sort of collective coexistence and peace building in the land. And even when we did bring up the subjects, it didn't go very well. In other words, me and Amitai didn't have the desire and capacity to work together to live in a peaceful reality. Sadly, me and Amitai are not as close friends today. And in many ways, this reflects a larger phenomenon within both the Israeli and Palestinian societies. The problem of lack of desire and capacity, right? And this was true before the horrific events of October 7th and the horrific events in Gaza, but it's even more so the case now. And I'm assuming this is not just a problem within Israel and in Palestine, but also in the US, right, where people lack the desire or for sure lack the capacity, at least from some of the visuals that I've been seeing from university campuses, at least in the US. But this is a problem that we face, and the problem that we're actually trying to fix, and this is our mission at the Roasting Center.
So, as John described his personal problem, we see this as this is a central problem in trying to find a way forward for Israel and Palestine. And that's been true for years. It's not that this is a new problem as of October 7th, but obviously the terrible events of October 7th and everything that has unfolded since have made the problem much worse. And if we look a little bit at some of the figures, this is a bit of a confusing slide, but I think it points out an important phenomenon, which is that whilst, according to survey results, recent survey results, only 10% of Jews in Israel support violent acts against Arab citizens of Israel. So I'm not talking about supports the war in Gaza. There the support is massive, but supports violent acts against Arab citizens of Israel. Something like 10% of Jews say, yes, they support such acts. That's pretty shocking. But Arabs think that 50% of Jews support violent acts against Arabs. And if we look on the other side, whereas only 2% of Arabs say they support violent acts against Jews, Jews believe that 65% of Arabs support violent acts against Jews. And again, I'm talking about Arab citizens of Israel, Arabs who actually live in Israel. Now, in this case, we believe that the 2% figure is unlikely. I'm sure the support for violence against Jews in Israel is higher than that, but I think in the current reality, you'd sort of let's put it this way: if I were an Arab in Israel and somebody who I don't know called me up to do a survey, even though the person asking the question is also an Arab, there is no way I would possibly say, even if I vehemently agreed with violence against Jews, there's no way I would say so, because you have to be sort of pretty. I mean, it's a very dangerous thing to say. So I think the 2% figure is low. I fear the 10% of Jews is low, but what's clear is that our perceptions of the other side are that there is great support for violence against each other, and in fact there's much, much lower support.
Can I just ask a clarifying question?
Of course.
Did that include the West Bank?
No. This is only, well, it includes, I assume it includes Jews from the West Bank, because Jews are regarded as living in Israel wherever they live, whereas here the survey only surveyed Arabs who live within Israel.
And when was the survey conducted?
In January. On the other hand, across the board, we can see that 77% of Jews, 62% of Arabs say that their sense of safety, their sense of personal security has deteriorated since October 7th. And for most people, I would say that their sense of security has deteriorated drastically. And one of the main phenomena that we're dealing with is the level of fear. So it isn't new. Rabbi, as you said, you've heard from us before. Organizations like ours have been around for quite a long time. Some organizations have been around for decades. So why are we in such a dire situation? Why haven't we managed to prevent things like October 7th, or to, in fact, reach, come to some sort of resolution of this conflict? I think there are a lot of reasons for that, and obviously a lot of them have to do with things way beyond our control, global superpowers and everything that plays out in our arena. But I think there are also limitations of the field. And if we look at the limitations of the peacebuilding field until now, the first thing is that we have been fragmented. There has been very little coordination across the peacebuilding field amongst different organizations. The peacebuilding work has been insufficiently systematic and mainstream. It tends to be round the fringes of society. It tends to only bring in people who already agree that that's the way forward. It's not embedded in society, and it's not done in such a way that the effects last. And the third thing is that too many of the methodologies that we've been using, and I include us in that, I hope we've got better, but too many methodologies are weak. I can tell you that my son, when he was in high school, went off for a weekend or 2 days of dialogue, and he came back worse off than before he went. It would have been better if he hadn't actually participated in that dialogue program, because it made things worse. So,
can you say more about what that meant?
So he basically, his experience was of going off, I guess they were paired, his Jewish school was paired with an Arab school. Schools in Israel are basically segregated. I think maybe they had an hour or so of getting to know each other sort of programs, and then they were thrown into talking about the conflict. So they came away from it feeling that there was nobody to talk to. They weren't given any tools of how to talk about the conflict or how to listen to people with different opinions from theirs. They were just thrown into this situation, and they didn't cope very well. So they came away from it basically just saying, forget it. There's no chance. So I think there's a misconception that dialogue is always good. No, dialogue isn't always good. Dialogue can do damage. So we have to be thorough in the methodologies we use. So the good news is that things are getting more joined up, and in the shared society work, when we talk about shared society, the terminology keeps changing, and it's sort of confusing, I know. So we used to talk about coexistence, but that became, for all sorts of reasons I won't go into now, became a problematic term. And we tend today to talk about shared society. Shared society means working within Israel, between the different groups in Israel, between Arabs and Jews, but other groups as well, obviously. We have Druze, between all the different ethnic and religious groups in Israel, to create a shared society, to create social cohesion, to create a truly democratic society. In that area, organizations are already working much, much better together. And I believe that is one of the reasons why, even following the terrible events of October 7th, we have not seen, so far, please God, it won't happen, terrible violence exploding on the streets of Israel's mixed cities and across the country as a whole. Because we have been working tirelessly since October 7th. It's remarkable to me that there was a meeting of the coalition of organizations on October 7th. An emergency meeting was called that night after the Chag and Shabbat went out. An emergency meeting was called. I think we had like 200 people at that meeting to say, okay, our job now is to stop this turning into a bloodbath all over Israel. How are we going to do it? And we worked very hard. And because it was joined up and coordinated, it helped. On the peacebuilding side of things, as in cross-border with Palestinians in the West Bank, and one might have once hoped Gaza, that is still in process. The joining up is still in process, and we've still got a lot of work to do. The work has been insufficiently systemic and mainstream, so our main focus is working within the mainstream for institutional change. Most of our work takes place within the education system, with the approval of the education ministry, and trying to create systemic change in schools. Schools at the moment do not educate children to live in a shared society or to believe in peace. And that's got to change. We have to make schools educate children so that they can have those conversations, even if they're not friends at school, even if they're not in the same classroom, that they have the tools, that they do not have the experience my son had, that they have a different experience when they actually get to meet each other. And there's a lot of work that you can already do, you know, even without them meeting each other. So that's what we're trying to do. And we're trying to be much more rigorous about the methodologies. So we use evaluation, we do impact evaluation to make sure that our work is having the desired effect. I can tell you that one of our programs, which was in elementary schools, we had already expanded to the point where we had 40 schools participating in the program, Jewish, Christian, and Muslim children. So we had over 1,000 kids taking part in this program each year. And when we did the really proper impact evaluation, we decided the program wasn't working, it wasn't good enough. And we've closed it down and redesigned the program, and we'll start smaller and build it up again. But if we're not making the impact, it's better not to do the work. Because otherwise we're just throwing away everybody's money and our time and resources, and we have to make sure that we're having an impact. The work has to bring people to the table with all of their multiple identities. There tends to be organizations which only deal with religion but leave the conflict at the door. You can't leave the conflict at the door. People who only deal with national identities and don't relate to religion. We have to put all of it together. And the other thing that we have already been doing for several years, but has to be a part of this, is trauma healing. Because by now, both sides are so deeply traumatized that if we don't heal the trauma, we will not be able to move forward.
So, this is who we are. I mean, we're 18 staff members. Not everyone is here in the picture. We took this picture literally a week ago in our center in Ramle. Has anyone read the book The Lemon Tree? Yeah? So the open house, which is the story of the lemon tree, this is where we operate in Ramle. So whoever, I don't know if everyone knows about the story, but basically this is a Palestinian home, family that live pre-48, post-48, when the family gets kicked out, a new refugee Jewish family eventually get hold of the house in fast forward 1967. The Palestinian son and his two cousins go to the house, and in the house they knock on the door, and the person who opens the door is the daughter of the Jewish family. And she lets them in, and they get to see the house, and they develop a very complicated friendship. This is not a love story, romantic story. They develop a very complicated friendship, and eventually, this is a very long story, but they manage to come to the agreement to dedicate the house to coexistence work and to dialogue work and to the local Arab-Palestinian community in Ramle. So this is in 2020. They're basically Dalia, the owner of the house, the girl in the book, who's now much older, basically asked us to take over some of the activities in the house. So this is from Ramle. We're half Israeli Jewish staff. The other half are Palestinian citizens of the State of Israel. We have Muslim, Jews, Christians. Half are, we also have people who are religious, people who are secular. We're a mosaic, just as you can see in the graphics. And all are experts within the field of education and interreligious dialogue. And this team also, according to some of the external evaluations that we've been doing, really provide results. This is not the work that me and Sarah do. We aren't in the field. This is our talented staff. But from university students who participate in our program, the majority report that they reduce their levels of fear of one another, they're more comfortable, and they also have tools to conduct dialogue in campus, but also elsewhere. I used to be a field staff, and I used to be a facilitator conducting dialogue, and I remember a participant come to me and say, I used to participate in many dialogue programs, but this is the one that has focused the most on trauma. And this has really changed the way I think about the whole conflict. Also, we do a lot of teacher training work, so we're trying to essentially provide the tools for teachers to be facilitators in the classroom, because the conflicts outside of the classroom will enter into the classroom, right? Whether it be the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, or the religious secular tensions, or left-right sort of political opinions, they enter the classroom, and teachers have to deal with them. So the majority of the teachers that participate in our program report to us and to the external evaluations that they have the tools to do so afterwards. So all of that statistics is pretty nice and good, and we work with around 60 to 80, depending on the year, 60 to 80 educational institutions, because we want to work institutionally. That is great, but we're trying to scale up. So these are the next steps that we're going to be doing as an organization. We're going to try and scale up the number of institutions, because we know that our methods work, we just need to scale it up. We're trying to work holistically within the schools, so not just with the odd teacher, but work with the principal, the teachers, especially the leading teachers, and the students themselves. It has to be holistic. The parents are not the target population that we work with directly, but we're hoping that if we change the ecosystem of the schools, it will also have an effect on the parents. And the third one is we're, again, trying to strengthen partnerships. We're realizing after October 7th and May 2021, we have to work together, not only locally, but also internationally. Because also what happens in Israel and Palestine affects what happens here in New York, and vice versa. So these are some of the next steps that we're going to take at the Reassessing Center. I'll stop now so we can sort of have more of a conversation. And yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more just about what the program looks like as people go through it, just to give us a flavor for what the methodology is, what the kind of training is, to give us a sense of that work, or that aspect of the work?
So we have a number of different programs, which makes it quite difficult to answer that question. But perhaps I'll tell you about the program that we developed, our basic approach to dialogue, because we have developed a unique methodology for that purpose. I'll tell you, we started working on this. I started thinking about this 20 years ago. During the Second Intifada, I was working with a clinical psychologist who himself had been injured by a terrorist attack. And we were talking about the fact that if you get injured in some such attack, you get help from the state to help you return to normal functioning, so that you can work, so that you can look after your children, so you can go to school, normal functioning. Hating the people who did this to you, that's normal, right? So that doesn't need treatment. But what are we going to do as a society if hatred becomes normal? So I started thinking about that 20 years ago. Sadly, we've got to a place where, yes, indeed, I think hatred has become pretty normalized. And I felt that the regular dialogue methods weren't working. So it took a while, but I worked. Then I started working with Professor Ruchama Weiss from HUC in Jerusalem, who brought pastoral care, spiritual counseling to Israel, which was a new thing at the time, and with a wonderful man called Sami Awad, who's at the time worked at the Holy Land Trust in Bethlehem. And we started trying to see how we could use these tools of spiritual counseling, applying them to the trauma and applying them to the conflict. And essentially that's what we do. We're doing a workshop this time next week, where we will introduce whoever's there to some of those, to give a taste of the tools and our approach to dialogue. It's an approach that changes the normal dynamic of dialogue and creates something different. And we've found it to be enormously effective. And it's, I mean, in a way, sadly, exactly what the tool that is needed now when everybody is so traumatized after everything that we have been through and are still going through.
And are there, because obviously it's not reaching everyone, are there sectors of the society where this work, whether it's through you or through others, is primarily not being done? Is your work primarily focused center, periphery, urban, non-urban? Like, give us a sense of, you know, who's likely to go through this kind of an experience?
Yeah, so most of the schools that we work with are sort of the public schools, but what we call sort of the secular public Israeli schools, both the Jewish and Arab ones. The schools that are harder for us to work with are the ultra-Orthodox, the Haredi schools, and also some of the religious sort of nationalist schools as well, where they're a bit more sort of hesitant to work with organizations like ours. So most of our work is within sort of those schools.
And then can you tell us a little bit about how your organization has been, I mean, you allude to some of it in the PowerPoint, but some of what's changed from October 7th in terms of approach, in terms of where you feel the focus needs to be. Is it just more of what you're already doing or some other kind of recalibration?
Obviously, you know, October 7th took us all, you know, took us all by surprise. And has, you know, it's been a deeply painful time as we grappled with everything, and obviously among, you know, our Jewish staff lost friends, lost, you know all sorts of people who've been very impacted by this and have lost people themselves. And on the Palestinian side also, we have one member of staff who has lost dozens of her family members in Gaza. So it's, you know, it's been painful, and we took time at first to do some uninational work, and we also do that now with our groups. So to bring the Jewish members of staff together, to bring the Palestinian members of staff together separately, to allow some private processing of what was going on, and then carefully brought everybody back together again. And of course all of this was happening over Zoom, because we don't have facilities with bomb shelters where we could bring everybody together safely. So all of this was going on over Zoom, which, as you all know, is not an ideal way to conduct dialogue. It can be done, but it's not ideal. And then in terms of our programming, absolutely, I would say we are still in a process of reassessing our programming. The first, basically those last 3 months of 2023, we just concentrated on emergency response, including doing things that would never have imagined we would find ourselves doing. Distributing food parcels in East Jerusalem is one example. Offering emergency support to teachers to help them work out how to process, to help them process stuff so that they could support the children in their classes. And as I said, playing an active role, particularly in Ramla, because that's where we have a center, but also in Jerusalem, to try and make sure that things didn't escalate. And then since the beginning of this year, we've got back to more of our regular work, but it's not the same. And we're having to reassess and work it out as we go along. I think we're one of the very few organizations that has successfully run dialogue since January. We have a university program at Hebrew University, and when first of all, we've been working with the university for a number of years, and they called us in to help them work out how to reopen the campus, because you can imagine that they were, the war is still going on, and at that point was really very acute, and you're going to bring Palestinians from East Jerusalem to come and sit in a classroom with Jews, some of whom at least are carrying big guns. How is that going to work? So how do we actually do that? So we help them in a process of working out how to try and do that. And we reopened our dialogue program, and it's been very challenging, and we're doing much more uninational work, so allowing people space to, that not all the time people need to be together. But we're working it out, and we're now in the process of working out what is next year going to look like, as far as we can tell, because of course we still don't know. The war is still going on. The hostages are still in captivity. There is no sign that that's about to change. So, I don't know what the situation is going to be. So we have to just sort of adapt as we go along.
I want to make sure those of you who have note cards and have questions that you are thinking of, that you have a chance to write them. So this is a great opportunity to do it, because in a few minutes I think we'll pivot to hopefully. Let's write them and turn them in. Because I don't think we'll be able to take them all. Thank you. As we do that, I'm wondering if you could each also maybe say what, when you said sort of it's obviously changed, but I wonder if you could be more explicit about what feels like it's changed in this work. I mean, so much has changed, but in this space, is the nature of the dialogue, is it just, we can imagine, but it's helpful to hear.
Yeah, so at least when it comes to dialogue, if trauma was an emphasis before October 7th, it is sort of the central theme that we're discussing, and all of the dialogue is around trauma and how personal trauma can affect the way we understand ourselves, the conflict at large, our identities, our narratives, so on and so forth. Recruitment of schools has been a challenge, right? How do we recruit schools and principals and teachers who are already overworked, and they at least for some of the weeks and months had to teach over Zoom, so they're zoomed out, right? How do we convince these schools to join our program, especially when people are reporting to be more fearful, have more hate, and so on and so forth? So that has also been a major issue for us, is how do we try and recruit these schools, and trying to find different needs for the schools that will allow them to sort of want to join our programs. On the other hand, we've also seen academic institutions like the Hebrew U who have approached us and said, we have these mixed students, what do we do? So there's been sort of a change in how we do recruitment.
Have there been groups who you had been working with who have pulled away?
Yes, particularly Jews. We, for our elementary school program, which we just redesigned, and then we didn't get to to pilot after all, so then we had to rewrite it yet again. and the Arab schools, we rewrote it as a purely union. It was clear we weren't going to be bringing kids together this year. There was no way that was going to happen, but that you can do very, very good and important work separately. So that was the plan, and the Jewish schools who were meant to be taking part said they can't. And even we're in close contact with the Shared Society unit of the Ministry of Education. Our coalition of organizations has been trying to push them to come in with us on a conference to talk about where do we go from here. And essentially even the Shared Society unit of the ministry says, we can't really talk about Arab-Jewish relations right now. So our recruitment challenge is mainly on the Jewish side. On the other hand, amongst the students for our programs, we'd recruited before October 7th because they were due to start right after. So we'd already recruited them, and we were sort of surprised that the vast majority, almost without exception, still wanted to take part, even after October 7th. But it's challenging.
We are dependent upon our news to get us most information about what's going on the ground, which is rather unfortunate. And having had an opportunity to travel in Israel since October 7th, you come back feeling like you don't have a full picture when you are here. And I'm wondering if there are stories or experiences you would lift up to us that would be helpful for us to know, whether they're hopeful stories or more challenging stories, but knowing a little bit about the main kinds of things we're exposed to. Are there any stories from the work or from your life that might be useful to us as American Jews to be able to hold on to and think about?
Yeah, generally when it comes to media consumption, I think it's been a challenge for everyone, wherever we are, whether it be here in the US or locally. It's actually quite sometimes sad to be in dialogue with either Palestinians or Israelis and realize how their media consumption is completely two different worlds. So that is something that is extremely challenging, and something that I think we all need to do is kind of always try and challenge, always think critically about what we're consuming and try and consume it from a variety of channels. I think is a huge need that needs to take place. There is good work being done. So partially what Sarah was mentioning, when there was in the night of October 7th, when all these organizations came together, they helped prevent, partially, it wasn't just these organizations, but part of it was these organizations working together to prevent violence in these mixed cities. And we work in Ramla Lod, so we did the work within Ramla Lod trying to bring in civil society. So these are stories and impact that we're not hearing about, that need amplifying in various areas, not just in Israel, Palestine, but also here in the US. So there's a need to amplify these voices of good work that is being done. Again, the situation is still very difficult, but we need to also provide for those who have still a bit of hope, some fuel to carry on.
I guess, I feel that there's a Israeli song, that references the fact that what you see from there is not what you see from here. And at the moment, Israeli media is really only showing one side of the story, the Israeli side of the story. Most Israelis are barely exposed to stories about what's going on in Gaza. So what you're bombarded with on a daily basis, we're not seeing. We have to make an effort to go to find it. If you're a mainstream Israeli who's not actually an English speaker, and therefore you don't consume English news, and if you're a mainstream Israeli who has been taught to be extremely suspicious of anything that smells in the slightest bit left wing, so you don't consume any of that media either, then you are simply not seeing what is going on. And I think that is clearly hugely dangerous. It's also dangerous for the relationship between you as Jews here and Jews there. Because what you're seeing, and it's not only that what Israelis are seeing and what Palestinians are seeing is so completely different, it's that what Jews here and what Jews there are seeing is completely different. So I'm always torn, because I feel deeply compassionate towards Israeli Jews who are so caught up in this trauma, and I so understand it, and that is what they are being fed night after night on the news, and I actually have to make an effort to not get completely swept up in that, because that's all you see. And if that's all you see, then you are, in a way, being re-traumatized. You can't open a Hebrew language news outlet without seeing over and over and over and over again the stories, and I understand why, and the stories of the hostages, for example. Until the hostages are released, I don't see how Israeli Jews are going to move forward. And on the Palestinian side, of course, until this war ends, and that terrible, terrible situation ends, and even when the war ends, as if our government has any interest whatsoever in ending this war, because I'm sorry, but our government does not have an interest in ending this war. And what does that even mean? Because what's going to be left? So so I'm sorry, that's not very hopeful. But I do think that this may be a moment in history that is so traumatic that it does indeed breed change. Because maybe once we get through this trauma, people will understand that there has to be another way. And that's the hope that I cling on to. You've been given a lot of questions to ask.
Yeah, just really quickly, the same way that Israelis are sort of receiving very specific information, it's the same case for Palestinians. So a survey that was done, this was in the West Bank and in Gaza, over 90% reported that, or claimed that there were no atrocities that took place on October 7th, right? And this is, again, because of a lot of the media that is being, they're simply not seeing it the same way we are seeing it. Those at least who, I also consume media in Hebrew, so I have access to that, but others are not. So this is, it's not just an Israeli Jewish challenge. It's a challenge for all the different communities.
I do have a stack of questions, and we'll do our best. So the first in the stack is, how does the center's trauma work differ from other methodologies in dealing with recent trauma on top of generational trauma embedded across these communities?
I think that most dialogue programs don't address trauma. I think that's a major difference, is that we really put the trauma at the center. And seeing as it's the time that it is, I don't know who asked this question, but what I'm going to say is, come next week, I'm not even on here on behalf of Central Synagogue advertising our next event with you. But come next week, because then we will be telling you about that methodology, that healing hatred methodology. We'll explain it to you, and we'll give you a chance to do some of it for yourselves. So come next week for an answer to that question.
This is going to go very quick, I can tell. Then we can move through all of these questions. So how do you address the loss of trust, trying to rebuild that trust? This person says, I asked someone who is living there, which I assume means Israel, if programs that previously brought Jews and Arabs together are surviving, and he expressed that this issue of lack of trust and suspicion is really big.
Yeah, it is. It's huge. I think what we see is that people who had strong relationships, and where those relationships included talking about the difficult stuff, those relationships have survived and are fine. John and I are fine, okay? That doesn't mean we agree about everything. We don't agree about everything, but that's okay. Our relationship can survive that. People who had what they thought were strong relationships, but they've never actually talked about the difficult stuff, their relationships have not survived it. And people who had no relationship at all, then it's hardly surprising that they have moved even further apart. But building that trust, and again, indeed, our methodology does do that. Building that trust has to be key. But, you know, I also look back at my son's negative experience. You can only talk about the difficult stuff when your relationship is strong enough to survive it. I think of dialogue work as being a sort of, it's a process. You start, and you start by beginning to build relationships, and then at a certain point you have to start talking about the difficult stuff, because if you do it too early, the whole thing explodes. If you don't do it, if you leave it too late, people don't want to talk about the difficult stuff because they're worried it might ruin their relationships. What they don't know is sooner or later violence will explode in Israel-Palestine, as it does the whole time, and their relationships won't survive it if they don't learn to talk about the difficult issues. So you have to time it carefully so that you've got the basis of trust that can hold the difficult conversations.
And we've been here 2 days with the amazing weather, and from the conversations we've had with people, they've told us how interreligious relations here have been damaged, and trust. There's lack of trust, and people who thought they were good friends and had these amazing relationships are now questioning all of this. And according to one of, we met a friend of ours today, and he said, or he disclaimed, that a lot of the interreligious work was just about holding hands and taking pictures, right? Or as we say, eating hummus together, and that's it. So we need to think, I think, collectively, how do we approach interreligious dialogue in a different way?
So in terms of timing, another question is, at what age are children ready for programs like these? And do parents, in your experience, want their children to participate? Are they reticent to have them participate? Are there differences between the different groups that you're reaching on those kinds of issues?
I think that our message to schools and the work we're going to be doing with principals in the coming years is to say that, you know, I think kids need to learn these skills from the moment they start going to not only school, to kindergarten, to preschool, to whatever. I think this is simply how we have to grow up, is we have to grow up knowing how to talk to each other. And, you know, it's the same things that you have to learn to share and so on, you have to learn also with other groups and etc. But obviously it's different at different ages. So our program that we do in elementary schools is not the same as what we're suggesting that high school teachers do. So and it has to be a gradual process, as educators know, of building layer upon layer of understanding. By the way, you cannot teach the Palestinian narrative in schools in Israel. You're literally not allowed to. So that's something that we actually only do at with our university groups, because within the school system you can't do that. But there are all sorts of other things you can do. You don't have to necessarily teach the narrative in order to talk about intergroup relations, in order to talk about what is democracy, all sorts of things that you can do. So it all has to be age appropriate, but it has to go, from kindergarten all the way through.
I'll be super brief. Studies suggest that by the age of 4, kids already know that there's sort of different groups that are in conflict with one another. My nephew, who's 5, when rockets reached Jerusalem and there were sirens, he asked me, uncle in Arabic is Ammo, so Ammo John, are the rockets fired by Arabs or Jews? He's 5. And this is why we need to change the whole ecosystems of these schools that are working with kids as early as 5 years old.
And I'm guessing some of the limitations on what you can teach might also impact. You said there's really good work you can do without bringing groups together, and some of that maybe, it sounds like, is that kind of, what does a democracy look like? What does a shared society look like? How are those values invaluable? Okay.
Absolutely. You can teach, values such as human dignity, equality. These are all things that you can teach without actually meeting each other. I believe that at some point people have to meet each other. Obviously they have to actually go have that experience, and it should be built into the education system, which at the moment it's not. You can go through, my youngest daughter went through her entire education system without having anything through school. I insisted that she take part in a program before, I insisted that all my children take part in a program before they finish high school. I was not prepared for them to go into the army, never having met a Palestinian their own age. But you can absolutely, most Jewish kids will go into the army never having met a Palestinian their own age.
How many people have you reached, and can you quantify how many relationships have developed from the work? And how do you sustain those relationships once they're made? Are there annual gatherings, regular events, check-ins?
Yeah, so on an annual basis, we work with, it again depends, and now during the war it differs, but around 8,000 people, 8 to 10,000 people if we, again, depends on the year, around 60 to 80 educational institutions. So we work with quite a lot of people. Again, we need to work with a lot more. It's not enough. And we do sort of alumni sort of meetings for university students so they can continue in the work. And we also do different sort of online activities as well to try and keep people in the loop.
Are there other learnings from multicultural countries that have been useful or influential in developing your sense of methodology and shared society?
Yes. One of the inspirations for our healing hatred work was work done in South Africa by Father Michael Lapsley at the Institute for the Healing of Memories. He has done amazing work there, and that was one of the stimuli for our work. And now, in these last few months, we've initiated a series of international webinars to bring in experts from around the world, not bring them in physically, meet with them online, to basically, I want to pick the brains of anybody I can, because I feel that, we're in crisis. we need to think about what we do. We had a wonderful, you can find all of these online, either on our Facebook page or on our YouTube channel. We had a wonderful webinar with a young man from Rwanda, because we wanted to hear about, you know, how did you do peace education after the terrible atrocities, after the genocide in Rwanda? How did that work? You know, what did you do? Tell me, please. And we're going to continue that. So absolutely, we do our best to, you know, as I say, I want to pick everybody's brain. And while we're here, we're meeting with all sorts of people, also to ask, you know, what are your thoughts? You know, we certainly don't have all the answers.
Just looking at the time, this will be the last question, which I'll again say, but they're here again next week in case you didn't hear that already. And so there's opportunities to ask these questions again, and also, to, as we heard, to really not just hear but experience what this work is like, how the methodology is run, and to really get a window into it. And so we'll look forward to that, and thank you for that. The last question, and I'm glad somebody asked it, what opportunities are there for us to get involved in America?
Oh.
Great question. Part of the reason why we're here is we're trying to expand the community of the Rossing Center, but the whole peacebuilding and shared society interreligious work within Israel. So feel free to take a brochure to learn more about the organization, sign up for the newsletter, follow us on social media, and participate in some of our online activities. If you don't like us, follow another organization in the peacebuilding and interreligious field within Israel and Palestine. You know, do what you can within your given context, and that will look different for each person, but you can be part of the solution with your given talents and skills, and a lot of work needs to be done here in the US. You can do that in partnership, so we want to expand the community, and for those who have the means, also financially supporting us would be amazing. If you don't have the means and you know someone else who does, send them the information. And again, it's not just about the Rossing Center, it's about the whole field. So again, if you don't like us, you're more than welcome to look up other organizations that may fit you better.
Just to finish up, I want to say that, you know, I think we're at a crossroads. And I think either we learn to live together or we're going to die together. Remember that verse, choose life? Choose life means we have to do it together. I think we all want Israel to be a safe space for Jews, but I think we also want Israel to be a place that reflects our values. We can do it, but it's going to be a long, hard slog. We have not got an instantaneous answer, and frankly, anybody who tells you they have is you know, I don't know what they're on. It's going to take time. It's going to take a lot of hard work. But the bottom line is that I won't be safe until John's safe. John won't be safe until I'm safe. You guys won't be safe until we're safe. We won't be free until, you know, we're all free. And, you know, now's the time. Now's the time. We've got to make it happen now. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Again, a big thanks to the two of you for being with us, to all of you for braving the elements and being with us tonight and part of this ongoing series, and a huge thank you to our adult engagement staff and our other Central Synagogue teams who have made sure that this event could be on and go on. So thanks to all of you. Thank you.